this book, Vitamin K2? All right. It's interesting. I heard about the book. I was just thinking to myself, so if people with a vitamin D deficiency have depression, could I just use vitamin D to treat anybody that has depression? Like, would vitamin D fix any kind of depression? I was wondering about that. I don't know. So I started buying some books on the subject, and the K2 and the calcium paradox one came up. It had a sticker price of like $16 or something, but the only copies were used, and they were like $150 at the time. And I thought, that is way out of line with anything I've seen. I mean, but I guess it just went out of print, and they didn't print anymore, so if you wanted one, you had to pay the market rate. I waited. It went back into print, $16. All right. So that was the book that helped me understand that the fat-soluble vitamins have interconnected purposes in the body and should be in balance with each other. So A, D, E, and K2, and K1, but that's a little different story, are the fat-solubles. D helps calcium move from the gut to the bloodstream. K2 moves calcium from the bloodstream into the bones and the teeth. And A and D stimulate the bones to remodel the bone tissue so that there's a place for that calcium to go that's in the correct matrix structure. Then the book goes into the story of Weston A. Price. He's a dentist from the U.S. in the 1940s who speculated on something called factor X. So he traveled to places in the world where people from native cultures, meaning subsistence, hunting, and gathering societies, still lived freely. Here it is 80 years later. There aren't many of these groups left. He found it very interesting that they could have no dental care their whole lives, never brushed their teeth, never got cavities in some places. In other places they did. He thought maybe there was a nutrient they were taking in that made their teeth different, and he thought it might be vitamin K2. So after reading that book, I went to the dentist to have my teeth cleaned and to see if there was any other dental work to do. I had hot and cold sensitivity in a few spots in my teeth, and I was tired of being unable to drink hot coffee or eat ice cream with my kids. So I asked about getting one particular spot filled on a tooth that really kept me from enjoying those things. It was at the gum line. I don't know if that makes any difference. But the dentist said no, he wouldn't do it. And I didn't quite make a scene, but I did point out to him that it was my tooth and my money, and I'm tired of the pain, so could you please? And he didn't want to do it. Okay, I figured maybe he's got his reasons. So he left, and we sent his dental hygienist back and forth a few times for Pepsodent and floss holders and this and that. Shortly after the appointment, I finished the book on K2, and I decided to start taking it. And I tried natto. So if you guys haven't heard of the book, then I really doubt you would have heard of this Japanese breakfast dish called natto. Foulest food product ever in the history of time, bar none. I tried this 5 times. I tried just eating it. My body rejected it. I tried mixing it with kimchi. That was a suggestion. No good. I tried blending it and drinking it through a straw really fast. Came up really fast. I gave it every chance I could because natto is a great, rich source of vitamin K2, and it's cheap. Like another really great source of vitamin K2 is grass-fed butter that's taken from the cow right after the time when the grass grows. Its baby shoots. So if you can get that butter, or like a $2 little tray of natto that has 50 times as much of it, I really wanted this to work. No. So I just wound up taking some gel caps from Amazon, Got the life extension ones if anybody's curious. Next year in the dentist's office, I was curious, were my teeth still sensitive to temperature? I asked the dental hygienist to put her water pick on cold and spray my gum line to assess for cold sensitivity. And I felt it, but it's not like it was before. It wasn't an acute sensation. It was like there was a rubber glove over it or something. It just didn't hit it hard. And I just went, oh man, it worked. Oh my God. Now I don't have to pay this guy to fill my tooth. So I asked the dentist to come back and see me. He came back and I said, you remember me? And he was like, yeah. He said, do you remember that I wanted you to fill that spot on my tooth? And he goes, yep. And I said, the hot and cold sensitivity is gone. I've been taking vitamin K2. It's supposed to rebuild the dentin in the tooth. Here's the book. And his eyes went like this. And he was just completely surprised. He goes, is this in the literature? I thought, it's in the literature that I read. And yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Then the next year when I went back to see him again, there was nothing about K2 anywhere in the place, and I kind of found it disappointing that a case study dropped in his lap and he wasn't curious. But anyway. So the internet and a renewed interest in nutrition. This is kind of where I see orthomolecular medicine coming back. They're not calling it orthomolecular medicine anymore. I think maybe that term has just been poisoned enough. Like people hear lithium and they just go, oh. So, and lithium's got to be the best kept secret in psychiatry. It's got to be. It's so good for the brain, like rebuilding brain tissue instead of stomping down on symptoms. Why wouldn't you want your brain to grow? Why wouldn't you want new neurons and protect your hippocampus and all these other great things? So this is another great one, The Magnesium Miracle by Carolyn Dean. So it said in this book that you can treat anxiety with magnesium. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I eventually got around to using her actual product. She makes a product called Remag, which I keep it in my office, you know. And so if a patient comes in and they say that they're anxious, and the reason I go this direction is because supposedly something like 80% of Americans have a magnesium deficiency. We don't eat a whole lot of kale, you know, and stress depletes the body of magnesium. We live in a stressful society. The body has lots of magnesiums to rid our body of magnesium. It has lots of ways to hold on to calcium. And calcium and magnesium oppose each other. You got calcium causing muscles to contract. Magnesium causes muscles to relax. It makes sense just from a basic chemistry perspective. So I keep it in my office. And when somebody says that they're anxious, I say, well, let's just try this thing first and see if we can get your anxiety under control right here, right now, with this stuff. It's a magnesium spray. And they're like, right now? I say, yeah, you'll know whether it works. Before you leave this office, you will either say to yourself, I better get some magnesium, or that was stupid, and we'll try something else. So I have them do it. You know, they spray it on their arms, rub it in. I've gotten great responses from people, lots of people reporting anxiety of like 6, 7, and 8, coming down to like a 3 or a 4, and then they do a second application, and a lot of people get down to a 2. That's pretty good, you know. There's people who are unable to leave their house for 6, 8 months at a time, and then they take the magnesium spray oil, and they tell me in the office they got down to a 2. And I tell them, please go buy some magnesium oil spray. Get this one, because it's absorbed better. And then a lot of times they don't. And I think maybe it's just because magnesium hasn't been presented to anybody that way, that they don't recognize this as being something that would work, even though it's a natural part of our body. You know, it's a calcium channel blocker. It's going to bring down heart rate, brings down blood pressure. Sometimes I think it just does too many things well, and then people think it must be the placebo effect or snake oil or something, but it's magnesium. This is a very known substance. It'd be like saying wood doesn't burn. No. Okay, fine.
Was it you that told me that if you have a patient come in and they're apprehensive, you'll have them go do a magnesium soak?
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, I mean, you're just soaked in that stuff.
Well, so that's for people who. Yeah, so that was if I have a patient who's maybe on the fence about using magnesium, or they kind of don't want to do it, or they don't think it's effective enough. I found a business in Salem, Oregon, so it's pretty close to where I work, that has float tanks. They're kind of like a big whirlpool bathtub they have 1,100 pounds of magnesium dissolved into the bathtub. And you go soak in there for 90 minutes for $65. And at the end of that 90 minutes, you are going to know how far you can take magnesium in the treatment of your anxiety. Like however you step out of that tank, you're saturated now. So are you anxious? Or do you go home and have the best night's sleep of your life? You know, because if you go home and get the best night's sleep of your life, I mean, maybe you should think about that. So also good for insomnia. I couldn't believe the list of things in the Magnesium Miracle book that were possible to do. It seemed like almost every symptom of bipolar disorder could be improved with magnesium. I'm not saying that it's a cure for bipolar disorder. I'm saying that it moves the needle on the symptoms, and then we can see how much is left at the end of that. But another thing from the Magnesium Miracle book is that trace minerals are required for the body to use magnesium well. It probably triples or quadruples the effectiveness of magnesium to have the trace minerals present in your body. And by that I mean drinking a bottle or two large bottles of mineral water, say San Pellegrino. They have a lot more minerals in their water than some of the other brands do. Gerolsteiner has the most, but I just don't seem to run into it. But Pellegrino's at Safeway, so that's nice. And then they also have the soda cans. Have you ever seen a blood orange or Capistrano orange?
The blood orange is so good.
Yeah, I do too now. Those are in my fridge, and when people come in, I'm sitting there with my bottle of Pellegrino. I'm like, you want a Pellegrino? Go ahead, get one from the fridge. So they got the garbage cans are full of Pellegrino bottles. I originally did that to try to get people comfortable with lithium, you know. There's a little tiny dab of lithium in San Pellegrino. And when people came in and I would talk to them about lithium, they would say, that's like horrible, dangerous stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's in the water. It's right here. I don't know, but that's why I did it. And there was a very interesting phenomenon. There was a couple of families that I worked with where, for whatever reason, the family's all fighting with each other, and I'm only seeing one member of the family. They're the only ones taking any lithium. So I tell them, why don't you go get a case of San Pellegrino and ice it up and put it in the fridge and just keep pouring it for your family members, you know, just try to get them to drink the stuff. And every time I did that, and this was the thing, it was every time, they would say after about the third day that everybody calmed down, Dad stopped drinking so much, you know, Mom wasn't arguing, and so a lot of them just keep bringing these cases of Pellegrino home, and their lives are better, you know? And then I find out it probably wasn't the lithium. It was probably the trace minerals activating the body's ability to use magnesium well. I thought, well, then we got to add magnesium on top of that, and then everybody will just be asleep all the time. All right, so that's the magnesium book. Magnesium lotion. It smells like cookies, which is great the first 200 or 300 times. The trace mineral drops are okay. You know, you can actually rub the trace mineral drops into your arm too. You can put that right into your arm with magnesium. It tastes terrible. Here's the Could It Be B12 book. So I found a lab test for vitamin B12 deficiency. It's not the serum B12 test that we all know and love. It turns out that one tests cobalamin type 1, 2, and 3, and we're really only interested in type 2, which is the activated form of B12. The test for it is called the holotranscobalamin test, HoloTC. I spent about 3 days trying to find a place that would run this test, like 3 calendar days on the phone, trying to find a place that had this test. There was one lab in Colorado. They wanted $680 for it. Insurance doesn't cover it. And I thought, well, how much is a vial of B12? You know, it's $29. So if I just give a shot of B12, we'll find out anyway, right? I mean, if somebody has a B12 deficiency and that gives them energy and relieves symptoms, it was B12. But that I really came out of that out of desperation. And if there was a way to get that test for people, I would definitely do it. The iodine crisis. I'm new to looking at this one, but it kind of seems to fall into the same group. Iodine used to be in our bread until the 70s, and then iodine was removed from bread and replaced with, I think it's bromide. I don't know if anybody happens to know the answer to this one, but bromide competitively inhibits iodine in the body. And we're supposed to have iodine in us. We're supposed to, from sea vegetables and stuff like that, we're supposed to have iodine in us. Iodized salt is very poorly absorbed. And as a matter of fact, as soon as you open the container, the stuff all just starts to dissipate out of it. So I'm not really sure the iodized salt is worth much. It's an interesting, I'm still working on that one. Healing ADD. Anybody like this book? I love this book. So Daniel Amen, who he just calls everything ADD. His 7 different kinds of ADD are just 7 different kinds of different mental illness things. So he uses a PET scanner to monitor blood flow in the brain and see like what's happening where and how does that change when you perform tasks or don't. And I think that he knows all about orthomolecular psychiatry, because if you look in the case studies that he has and how he treats his patients, he addresses diet. He talks about vitamins and minerals and other things like huperzine A and soy lecithin and all, the things that are very healthy for brain tissue. He had a program he did with the NFL. So there's the brain damage problems that the NFL players have had. And he's used like a hyperbaric oxygen chamber along with other things to help them rebuild their brain tissue. And I bet there's applications for this in autism and TBI. What else? People that get infections, we'll get into that one soon too. That's also a pretty cool topic. When people insist to me that they have ADD, I pull out this book and I have them go through and pick which one of these 7 are you, and then we go to the case studies and all right, is this you? Is this close enough that we can really take this seriously? And sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. So here's the newest, second newest textbook on the guide to lithium treatment, published in 2016. There's no money in it, right? So pretty much all the research came from European nations and Australia and New Zealand. Places that have, I think a lot of those places have socialized medicine, don't they? So they have more of an interest in finding a use for these kinds of things. We're not geared to produce this kind of research here as much. Although there's few universities participate, I believe UCLA. This one by Carl Pfeiffer. Carl Pfeiffer was a big figure in orthomolecular medicine, and I like this book, and it's a good start to learning some vocabulary. Like what can orthomolecular psychiatry do? You can just see like there's a couple things, and he gives a couple really basic ways of looking at it from the orthomolecular perspective. It's about this thick. I would want to do that. J.J. Virgin. So she's a nutritionist. And a bunch of her books, I think this is probably her 12th or 15th book or something like that. Most of them are how to lose 8 pounds in 8 days, and she's got her jazzercise thing going. And then her son got just creamed in an auto versus pedestrian collision. And they gave him a 0.25% chance to live. He would never. So dissected aorta, and just real serious stuff. And she went to his hospital room and camped out with him. And so the nurses would come in with like a Diet Coke and a thing of Jell-O for him, and she would be like, "Get that stuff out of here. How about if you want him to drink something, how about water?" And then she wouldn't let him have the hospital food. She kept bringing in her own stuff and feeding him a ton of fish oil to try to get his brain going back again. And she said that her goal was to get him back to 110% of his original health. And she figures he's at 115 or 120 in his body, and for his mental health, he's back about 85%. He was gone when she got there. He was scrambled eggs, and she found a way of using nutritional stuff. That's her thing, is the nutritional stuff. She doesn't look like she does on the Jazzercise books in this one. Like, this one was a little more serious. I found out about her from listening to Dave Asprey's Bulletproof Radio. He's the Bulletproof coffee guy. I love that whole Bulletproof thing. Bulletproof Radio has gotten so much better in the last year or two. I would say at least 3/4 of the speakers he has now are doctors who had a health problem that they needed to fix, and conventional medicine wasn't cutting it, so they had to find another way, and then they write their story, and then there's this book. Great stuff. Mostly doctors. That's him. Headstrong is great. This one just came out. It's about learning how to help the mitochondria function better, and how to clear out dysfunctional mitochondria and to grow new ones. And it's got some good products and stuff too. Nutrient Power is a direct descendant of orthomolecular medicine from the original greats, the biochemistry. Oh, I forgot, there was something I wanted to mention about this. So Dr. Richard Cunin is one of the original orthomolecular doctors, and he's still around. He's still practicing today at the age of something like, 88 or 89. You should look at the picture of him on his website. He looks like he's 60. It's amazing. He wrote a paper in 1976 on tardive dyskinesia and how to fix it. And I'm going to cut right to the answer and tell you that it was manganese at 20 milligrams a day. But I encourage you to find his book. I have used that on a patient with tardive dyskinesia and reversed it. 1. I have an N of 1. I've tried it with 2 people. The other one gave up after a month, and well, okay. So William Walsh, he's got a database of, it's all things that are bound in with that, I'm sorry, give me a second, please. What am I trying to think of? The methylation cycle. This is all tied into the methylation cycle. It's not written in such a way for us to understand what the methylation cycle is. It's for us to be able to repeat treatments out of their cookbook. So it's not necessarily going to give us all of that, the information that I would like to see. The good news is that he's affiliated with Dr. Mensa. I don't know if anybody knows Dr. Mensa outside of Chicago. He's officially trained by William Walsh to perform the assessments and to talk with patients. So they do it over Skype. Anywhere in the country, you can get in touch with Dr. Mensa if you think that somebody has a methylation cycle problem, and they will do it's blood test, urine test, and I don't know if they're doing fecal tests or not, but they take it back to the lab and they do his set of tests, and then they do his set of treatments. And so Dr. Walsh is the second one who has carried this particular torch, and now it's Dr. Mensa. He's kind of like the third doctor. It's been a continuous growth of this database for 60 or 70 years. And infectious madness. I just saw this sitting in a library. It was up on one of those tables of books right in the front, and I just thought, wow, what's that? I sat down to read it. I couldn't put it down. It was all these different vectors by which you could wind up with schizophrenia, and it was ear tubes and ear infections and certain kinds of fevers that you could have that would, so there's some kind of like microbial beginning to schizophrenia possibly. And same with bipolar disorder. For example, Hashimoto's versus Graves, right? Maybe they both have the same root cause, which is like a problem with the gut digesting wheat, and then the immune system gets activated and starts attacking the thyroid tissue. And so it can cause either Graves or Hashimoto's, kind of depending on where you are in the stage, and other people can cycle through it. So that's another thing. I just finally added that to my list of labs that I draw for my intakes for bipolar disorder, is for thyroid antibodies. If I don't check, I'm never going to know. And I also found out that something like 20% of women in the United States have that, and 0.5% of men. So finally, you ladies are ahead of us significantly. Mad in America. anti-psychiatry book. This guy hates psychiatrists and psychiatry and has great descriptions of antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. If you ever wanted to know how to differentiate between somebody's illness coming back or new symptoms being caused by the withdrawal of antidepressant medications, I think he's got 12 or 15 different stories about people that had that happen and then be misdiagnosed with something else, and then they wind up, getting the wrong meds. And you guys seen anything about remodeling of the brain, neuroplasticity? Great, really, really cool topic. If the brain gets damaged, it can move some of the function that it lost to a different part of the brain. I would encourage everybody to read this book. Talk about giving people hope. And there's Dr. Abram Hoffer's last book. Very readable, by the way. There's some legitimate criticism of this book, but sometimes I don't really care about that. Maybe I just want to read a book so I can scrape some vocabulary out of it, and then I'll try to look it up in something more reputable later on, All right. So the reason I wanted to talk about orthomolecular psychiatry isn't because I want anybody to stop using the pharmacopoeia. Far from it. To me, it's just adding more to the diagnostic process. Could it be one of these other things? And if it could, to just have the opportunity to try it. It's just more arrows in the quiver. I found that the more specific I get with these things, the better results I get with the answers. The thyroid thing has been very interesting. I've noticed a lot of people have like almost a goiter that I see. And some of them have a lot of the symptoms of bipolar disorder. Anybody have any? Who's got the first question?
You were talking about using the magnesium, rubbing it into your skin. How often do you apply it? I mean, what kind of interval do you apply it at?
I do it more by kind of like looking at the symptoms rather than saying you do it this much. I mean, any one given person might have more or less of a magnesium deficiency than another, So it might take one person more. So one treatment is one spray on each forearm and rub it in and give it 10 minutes, and then do a second spray on each forearm and rub it in. And then in 5 minutes, how do you feel? A friend of mine has been experimenting with a cold mineral pool at his house. So he bought some gigantic deep freeze. And it says he could get the temperature of his water down to, let's call it 35, give or take. And he's got 400 pounds of magnesium dissolved into this thing. So he dunks into it every morning for about 5 minutes. And he said it took him 22 days before the magnesium started to powder on his skin. So what he told me is that what he thinks is that he's finally saturated with magnesium. And he just feels calm and clear and very relaxed and not wasting his energy on things. So that's what he told me. It'd be hard to say, do this 3 times. I think it's just something we got to learn from the patients, how long it takes them. Next question.
Thank you for a provocative presentation. You've really given us much to chew on. So I have a question. Stress vitamins.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Stress vitamins, do they have a place?
Stress vitamins?
Yeah, because they're supposed to have trace elements and vitamins in a balanced manner, so I've heard. What's your take on their place in treating our patients in this stressful day of age when they've lost their vitamins and their minerals just because they're living. And now they're sick. I'll sit down and let you have at it. Thank you.
What do you mean by stress vitamins?
They're packaged. They're called, they have B complexes
They have them in like
them.
truck stops and stuff.
Manganese, magnesium, things that people, they say, oh, I'm going to have a multivitamin, but they generally don't think of a stress vitamin with trace elements. And so I'm wondering if you have given that any thought, because that would be easy if it's palatable in your way of thinking to give them to our patients and help them start taking care of themselves. And it's not complicated. So I'm going to leave now and let you fix this problem I gave you.
Okay. I don't know. I think that
Oh, go ahead. Finish your comment.
I think stress vitamins might be a really great way to go. I don't know how much minerals they have in them, but even if all they had was the minerals, that would still be great. And then if they got a B complex on top of it, that's also great. There aren't that many vitamins that are a bad idea. There's different kinds of B12, and I think that's important to watch out for. The fat-soluble vitamins, when they're not in balance, you can wind up toxic on those. But it's pretty tough to hurt yourself with vitamins. You'd have to just like throw them at your face really hard. And it's just hard to do. We need so much more vitamins than we already get. If you look at the recommended daily allowance of vitamin C of 30 milligrams or 50 milligrams. I think a good start is 2,000 milligrams 3 times a day.
Before you do your question, I wanted to throw in a comment. It goes into what you were saying about the B vitamin, or about getting the B vitamins. So we know that about 50% of the population in general, around about, has that MTHFR polymorphism. So remember, we talk about this all the time. So if you have that MTHFR polymorphism in an extreme way, where you're only converting about 33%, you most likely have a defect or polymorphism in the conversion of some of the other Bs. So that goes to that taking non-converted Bs, and what is that doing? Taking up the seats on the bus where it's not really getting to crossing the blood-brain barrier, doing what it needs to do. So I was thinking about that when you were talking about just throwing, we might be throwing some of the things at our face, but maybe if we absorb a little bit of that and we can use a little bit of that, it's better than nothing, because like you said, Kathleen, we live in a really stressful world, environment, et cetera, so it's a lot to think about. I don't know the answer either, but that hit me. It's like with the bees, like, well, how much of that are we really getting when we're taking that and we're feeling really good about it,
Well, which leads to my question. Whenever something good comes up, everybody wants to get on the bandwagon of, selling. So how do we know that whether we're going to Amazon or wherever, that's a reputable source for these different products?
Good question. I think one answer that might be good is there's a company called Pure Encapsulations that's considered the gold standard by many people who are into supplements. If you go with Pure Encapsulations, you're probably getting among the best quality out there that you can. But there's things that I don't think really need that kind of treatment. A B complex, like, you don't have to spend, $120 on a bottle of B complex. You really don't. I've been getting one called like Puritan B complex. It's the absolute cheapest one they have on Amazon. And it turns my pee yellow. So we're all nurses here. We can talk about this stuff, right? All right.
Okay, so I'm going to share something. We have time for one more question. I can never get that up there. So about 2 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, I had talked to Michael. We belonged to the same group, a Facebook group. Some of y'all who went to my presentation yesterday saw all my quotes from Facebook. It was that same group. And Michael had kind of really gotten me into really thinking a little bit more about magnesium and things like that. So I've got she was 16 at the time. I've been seeing her for about 2 years now. She just went off to college. Nobody thought she could or would. I put her on magnesium. At the time, we hadn't gotten into the transdermal so much. So I put her on magnesium glycinate, 400 milligrams. She would take 2 a day, and sometimes she would take 3. In B complex, once she got into taking the vitamins, and I'm telling you, this girl had been suicidal. She had been inpatient. She had been on multiple meds. You can imagine, Abilify, sertraline, the whole 9 yards. She comes into my office with more affect than I had ever seen. I'm really thinking maybe she was a little Asperger's when I first met her, very avoidant. She came in with all of this affect. It wasn't like, it disinhibited her. She was being hypomanic. It was an appropriate, normal affect. And she sat down on my couch in my office with her little bag, and she goes, "These vitamins you've got me on have just they're cured me." And I mean, she was, if you could have just seen the look on her face. And for me, and for all of us who treat, whether you're young or old, it doesn't matter. But when you see somebody have such a voracious experience, and she was so excited to feel better. So thank you for that. I never even told you that story, but I had planned to. But there's so much. I think big pharma isn't going to promote some of these things, so we really have to be diligent, I think, on ourselves and seek out some of this information, which was one of the reasons I was really glad that Michael was willing to come present today. We have time for one more question. Does anybody have anything? And then I'm going to do the closeout.
This question is in regard to the book about infection and mental illness.